episode 2 of our podcast. This episode is about Madam Web. The movie came out just, I don't know, a week ago or so.
2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. The movie came out recently.
Yeah, something like that. And obviously,
we watched it so that you don't have to.
Well, I mean, I always encourage people to watch everything, even if it is what this was.
I agree, because I wanted to watch this film because I had heard how people's opinions on it. And I don't really let opinions or reviews sway me from watching something. Yeah. I want to watch something because it catches my interest organically.
Yeah, and it's not like there aren't examples of times when people didn't like a movie or the response wasn't good, but then I completely disagreed with those evaluations. Right. So yeah, I mean, I trust my own opinion.
Exactly. But after having seen this movie, we're a little oof.
Yeah. So I'll warn listeners right now, we're going to talk about details of the film, and that means spoilers.
This has spoilers in it. So if that's not something you're interested in,
watch it first. Come back. Listen to our discussion afterwards. And if you weren't planning on watching it, that's fine too.
Yeah, join us.
And I think the goal is we're going to talk about the movie in a number of ways. First, the movie itself, right? The aspects of it, the writing, the acting, the blah, 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 in terms of like a Spider-Man adjacent story. But then also maybe we might discuss it in terms of just like filmmaking in general and comparing, to other practices and what maybe could have helped this film a little bit.
Because that's where I'm coming from going into this conversation. I know plenty about comic books. I know plenty about Spider-Man, Marvel.
Yeah, I would say between
DC.
us, you're more of the Marvel expert.
But I do not know very much at all anything about Madame Web and her character. I recognized 2 of the other characters in the film just because I've seen them in trading cards or in a random issue. But I do not know their stories. I'm going into this completely unknowing of what the source material is. And I'm looking at the film objectively as the film as a standalone, as a film.
Yeah. I mean, and for me, I only recognized 2 of the characters in all this, and none of them were really the main characters. And the other thing, too, that was strange about this, before we even talk about the film, is the marketing. I didn't see any advertising of this movie at all. And I watch all of the platforms where you would typically see this kind of advertising, like all of the streaming services and things like that. Typically, you watch in Hulu and there's an ad. And
the movie wasn't heavily marketed. I did see a few trailers. I did know it was coming. I was interested in seeing it from the moment I saw the first trailer. But as far as heavy marketing goes, no, not at all. This wasn't like a Venom or another Spider-Man.
And it reminds me of the whole backstory behind that movie, The Thing, right? With Kurt Russell and all that. Maybe the same thing happened here. So the story with The Thing is the studio saw, they watched the film after it was shot, before it was released, and they didn't have faith that it would do well in the box office. For whatever reason, the studio didn't like the film. They thought it was going to bomb. And instead of doing what, marketing kind of tells you to do, right, is find a way to still market the film and still try to recover your expenses, they did the opposite. They didn't market the film at all. So it was almost like they manifested that destiny. By not marketing the film, they didn't give audiences the chance to prove their feelings wrong about it. It could have done well. I mean, there were other factors like E.T. was also coming out at the same time. So there was a lot of competition in the box office for films that were better marketed.
Right.
So maybe that's the case here too. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's history. This was Sony, right, that owns the rights to these Spider-Man stories. It's not Marvel.
Yeah, Sony has the rights to Spider-Man, the Spider-Man IP. And while that IP falls under Marvel, the agreement that they made with Marvel Comics originally, which is what they're still holding, allows them to use any characters created in Spider-Man comics. So we're going from villains to side characters to supporting characters. They're allowed to make movies and media of those characters without having it to be a Marvel Studios film.
Right.
They have those rights.
But then the fandoms are going to make distinctions between what happens in the Marvel films and what happens in the Sony Spider-Man films. because
They're
people in
se-
fandoms tend to want to like keep timelines organized.
they are separate,
Right.
and it has been established that the MCU is its own timeline.
Mm-hmm.
616, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know what universe the Sony movies are in, but they are in their own separate.
Right. So they don't have to like connect.
Yeah, this Sony film that we just watched is definitely not the Tobey Maguire universe. It's not the Andrew Garfield universe.
Yeah. And those are also Sony
Oh, yes.
that made those.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that you brought up the fact that, we were watching the film, the sort of the quote unquote modern day shots are set in 2003.
Right.
And you pointed out while we were watching that at that time, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man would have been out and active. Peter Parker, would have been, in his 20s or whatever by that
I think
time.
Spider-Man 2 came out around 2001 or 2.
Right. And
mistaken.
yet, in this film, he's not even born.
Right. So it's kind of hinted that it's
year.
the Tom Holland Spider-Man.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I think that was because, and I think that was a choice in creation. Not that they want to link this movie to that universe, but I think it's just that right now as a culture, our Spider-Man is Tom Holland. So why throw a different date?
Yeah.
And just make it more like, who we're referring to.
Yeah, that had to be intentional because
Absolutely.
Otherwise, why just pick 2003 out of nowhere?
There was nothing in this film that needed it to be in 2003 except to line up with modern Peter Parker's
quote
age
unquote
range.
today's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, well, if they're not trying to maintain a relationship with the Marvel movies, then why even allow that to guide their
to give
decisions?
audience members the realization of where they are in a timeline of just like it's giving Easter eggs, like movies and comic book movies like to do to fans, to kind of give back to fans, where it's like, hey, we're introducing Ben Parker, and he met someone, we're not going to tell you who. Oh, it's his sister-in-law who's pregnant.
Oh, and what's the baby's name gonna be?
And we keep messing around and not saying it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, if that theory holds, then it's almost like, in my mind, if you would choose to do that in order to line up with the MCU's recent Spider-Man timelines, then what would the motivation for that just be to reduce tension between the two audiences in a way and say like, hey, you know what? We could still kind of line up a little bit. Like,
I don't think it's to reduce tensions because audiences are pretty much knowing that Sony produced Spider-Man films are not great.
Right.
And like Sony has an agreement with Marvel to use Tom Holland Spider-Man.
Right, because because of the last live action one they did where they brought characters from
ever since Civil War came out.
Yeah.
And like all the other standalone Spider-Man films. So there is like an agreement there, but Sony doing its own thing, I think it's more of a just doing fun Easter eggs, but I think it's also setting up the world you're in. You watch certain movies and you see historical events that have happened in real life, and it could be a fictional film, but you see something like the assassination of JFK, you kind of put your mindset of like, oh, okay, this is 1960, 1960, whatever. I don't remember the date. Or, oh, okay, this president, you see him in the background. Okay, this is like 2008. I think it's just world building mixed with a little bit of an Easter egg. I think that's really why, because it's really arbitrary for it to be 2003.
Yeah, a little bit. And the discussion of, Sony v Marvel, that was a big component of the discussion that's taken place since the movie was released, because the actress who plays
Madam
Web, what was her first name?
Caitlin? Carrie?
The actress has fired her own agent immediately after filming began. I think it wasn't even before filming wrapped.
Oh, I thought it was like after.
I can't remember. It feels to me like it was even before.
She fired her agent
before it wrapped, because she was under the impression, I guess her agent gave her the impression,
that
this was going to be her entrance to the MCU.
Aha.
And then when she found out that it was Sony and that she was not going to be part of the larger universe,
I'd be a little
any
mad.
actor, actress, thinking they're going to join the MCU, that could be a career making thing. And then
Yeah.
to turn around and enter into, Sony's reputation,
Mhm.
I would say, of not coming anywhere near the quality that
Well,
we've seen from Disney Marvel.
and I mean, even if just your agent signed you up for one thing and then lied to you, and then you find out the truth, yeah, that's definitely fireable. Like,
yeah. Unless it's a pleasant mistake, because the in the new Last Airbender TV series on
Mhm.
Netflix, no spoilers, there's an actor in it who said in an interview he thought he was auditioning for the Avatar movies with James Cameron, not Avatar Last Airbender, and he still got cast, and he
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
all right, let's do it.
I can't wait to find out who that is. I'm currently watching
Yeah.
the show.
It's pretty
I
fantastic.
can't wait to find that out.
I saw that story the other day and I was like,
That's-
I love that, because,
That's funny.
I guess in that respect, it was sort of a happy accident. Whereas, she's
Yeah.
obviously, I think she was sold on the idea, and
Yeah, she was
obviously
misled.
it sounds like she would have turned it down if she'd known this was not MCU.
Or at least, I don't know, maybe she might have turned it down, or maybe she might have been like, oh, okay, well, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, have the opportunity to come at it with a different attitude.
I definitely would imagine that she fired her agent because you clearly misled me.
Yeah. And I really doubt that the effects of that, walking onto that set and having to shoot knowing that this is not what you wanted, it had to come out on camera.
I've caught some of her interviews during her press junkets. It seems like she phoned it in during those press junkets. Like she was very over it.
Yeah. And I feel
Um,
like somebody actually asked her about this directly in a junket interview,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she was transparent about her agent lying to her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've talked about this before where like actors on press junkets, they try and sell the movie, that's part of
Yeah,
the
we
job.
did talk. Was that in the other podcast, our first
I think
podcast
it
about
was. I
we
think it
talked about
was. Yeah, it was very clear from press junkets that she had kind of phoned it in. And we've talked about also, sometimes actors, when you're in the middle of filming, even the crew and director and production, you don't know how the final product is going to look. You can only hope. Then you hear some stories of some actors talk about like, yeah, I walked on set and I immediately knew the vibe. I knew what this was going to be.
Yeah, but
you know?
I guess you're suggesting you wait until the reviews come out first before
You wait until,
really
like-
start to be honest.
Yeah, well, definitely, and it's kind of part of your job too. You're a representative of the show that you're on, and you kind of just hey, we're trying to sell it. I want to work in Hollywood again. I gotta do
Yeah.
my part.
Oh yeah, because we were talking about that because of the Gina Carano
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that probably the actress who played Madam Web here, maybe partway through the movie just kind of saw the production quality or just kind of got a bad vibe. You hear that from actors that they get bad vibes during a set, or they feel it like, oh no, this is gonna be, everyone's on key, everyone's on point.
So the movie itself,
Written by ChatGPT.
yeah, I mean, could ChatGPT have done a better job? So the writers, I guess we're talking about the writing first. So this is the same writing team as Morbius
Okay, well that explains a lot.
and some other.
Let me see. Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless.
Okay.
Writers of Morbius.
Yep.
Dracula Untold. And then it's The Last Witch Hunter, which was Vin Diesel's character, I believe, based on a D&D character he
Okay.
had. And then Gods of Egypt, all ranking 25% and lower on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I've only seen Morbius and the Dracula one.
And I saw The Last Witch Hunter and Morbius.
Yeah.
Morbius, yeah. Not a great production and kind of a messy film.
Yeah.
And then The Last Witch Hunter, I had fun watching it, but I enjoy a cheap thrill with some fantasy thrown in modern settings. It had an underworld vibe. And can I tell you I remember anything specific from it? No. Did I have fun watching it at the time? Yeah, but
Yeah.
forgettable.
Yeah. Now it makes me wonder, are these writers just being passed from studio to studio after one film apiece? Because if I was that studio, I'd be like, not again, guys. Sorry.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
that
definitely.
that was your one and done.
I think these guys
Was
are probably
Morbius Sony?
yeah, because
Oh,
he's a
God.
Spider-Man character.
Well, that's even worse. No, but I mean, like that's even worse because if you remember, Morbius actually they re-released it because it became a meme of how bad it was.
Yes.
And I think Sony was like, oh, maybe if we re-release,
Well,
we'll get like
there was a whole internet movement about people wanting it to come back to theaters and that they would go watch it. So Sony bought into it
right.
and re-released it.
Yeah, which was hilarious. It was like the whole internet rickrolled them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Nobody went to go see it in theaters again.
Right.
Yeah.
So you think even with the sort of weird meme cult popularity that Sony was like, okay, let's double down and remarket this, and then that failed?
I think that Sony has to produce movies with Spider-Man characters in order to keep the license. They cannot make Spider-Man films right now because of their agreement with Marvel, which is why we're seeing all these different side random characters. The next movie we have coming out this year is Kraven, which is a Spider-Man villain
from Sony,
and Sony Studios is producing it. And then we're also getting
are there already writers?
Yeah, most probably. And then we're also getting a third Venom movie as well.
I wonder if these guys are the freaking writers of those.
I hope not. These guys, I'm assuming that these guys are the duo that you call in when you have an IP or you have a, somebody came in and pitched you this movie and you're just kind of like, all right, that doesn't sound great. We'll call Matt and Steve over here.
Yeah.
And they'll just like hash out a script in a week.
Yeah, they'll rip something. And the budget maybe wasn't so high, so you're not gonna get, a AAA caliber director or writers or anything like that.
We don't want a whole writer staff. We just need two guys to crank out a script.
Yeah.
That completely this film. I mean, how many times was like face palming or like just sighing or rolling my I'm pretty sure at one point there was a line that just made me like tingle with cringe.
Oh yeah. I've got everything I need right here.
Oh my God, that was so terrible.
But yeah, the budget. I mean, just looking at the film, it feels like they had no budget, or maybe it was just we don't want to spend this much because the last time we overinvested.
Yeah, we definitely
lost our asses.
I think that it's kind of like those Redbox movies that were really popular, like Shark Tornado and things like that. Those movies,
Sharknado.
Yeah. Those like straight to DVD films, that production company made millions upon millions because they were making these films for like, I don't know, $100,000 or some crazy cheap budget. But then because the popularity of how cheesy they were, they made so much back that they made millions upon millions and kept releasing the movies.
Yeah, it's like the snakes on a plane approach.
Exactly.
It's like we're telling you flick now that this is a Sci-Fi Channel style film.
Yes, and I think what Sony's doing with these Spider-Man movies is one, they have to keep the license. So how do they do that? Just crank out the most bare minimum effort films. People will go see them because they're also realizing, hey, maybe we could trick some people, but even those that hate it will want to come see it so they can talk bad about it because any press is good press.
Interesting.
So it's keeping them relevant.
Like a meta of bad movies. But then it's like, well, what's a license worth if you're going to lose money every time you use it?
There are so many conversations about that, but you're absolutely right because it's been a conversation that I've been having with friends and comic book nerds for over a decade now of just like, Sony, why do you cling to this?
Yeah.
And I think it could be arguably, it's Spider-Man, the most popular Marvel character. Why should we give it away?
They're betting on a future value rather than a present value.
Or just pettiness, or just, you know what I mean? Like if you have I don't know how to put this. If you've got a rare collectible, one of a kind, if you've got like a #1 Superman, it's priceless. You know what I mean? Like it's just, you want to keep it out of selfishness instead of...
Well, did Sony have anything to do with the new Spider-Man game that came out?
They produced the games.
Okay, so maybe that's the value of keeping the license. We'll lose money on the movies because they'll suck, but we have to make them to keep the license so that we can do the things that actually will make money, like the games.
I didn't think about that.
Because the game smashed.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
I have not played a Spider-Man game that good since Spider-Man 2 on PS2.
Yeah.
And I've heard the Amazing Spider-Man on PlayStation was amazing. I played through the Miles Morales in between story game. They're incredible games, and this last one would blow your mind. It's so cinematically incredible. That's where they're putting their AAA writing team into.
Yeah, so maybe that's the theory. But
That's a good theory. I like it.
Yeah, we should talk about the plot of the film.
Oh, you found it?
It's been under my couch. So yeah, I mean, spoilers incoming. But basically, you know, this girl, she's God.
A woman
It
that
hurts
can
to summarize it. Okay, but
Okay.
basically,
a woman that can see the future sees that 3 random teenagers are going to get murdered and decides, because she's an AMT or a good person or has some sort of moral compass,
because she has the visions, she feels like she's the only person.
she feels obligated
who
that,
can
oh
help
my
them.
God, I can see their murder. I have to help stop them. And
Right.
then gets involved in trying to protect them.
Yeah, through Groundhog Day style mechanism of, oh, okay, that didn't
Seeing
work.
the future.
I'll restart it.
Exactly. And this man that's trying to kill them happened to have his own premonition that in the future they gate powers and
Right.
try to murder him
Yeah.
because he's a bad spider guy, and they turn into good
Apparently,
spider girls.
this spider in Peru or whatever that
Yeah.
they both were either bitten by. He intentionally, I think, did this to himself. Whereas,
He uses the venom probably in a toxin.
right. Whereas
never
for her,
covered.
it was just because her mother, while pregnant with her, was bitten. But they both have visions of the future. His vision was that these girls kill him, and yeah.
That's the premise.
Right. So that's the
That's the
premise.
plot.
And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It's that it wasn't written for us to like enjoy that or for it to make sense. And maybe the
It was
worst.
really messy.
Yeah, I think the crime was the pacing.
The pacing. We were an hour into the film, and we had established the main character. We had established the conflict, but there was really nothing going on. There was nothing really happening except, oh no, he's coming after us.
Right. It took an hour in a 2-hour film for the main character to attempt to tell any other characters what she was experiencing.
Correct.
It took her an hour to be like, hey guys, this is because I can see the future, I think. Like, it's not obvious how important it is for those sort of revelations to come out of the characters' mouths until you watch a film where that doesn't happen. And then you're like, God, get to the point. Like,
Mhm.
get us past the exposition of this character trying to figure out what is happening. And let's get to the part where they go, okay, this is happening. Now what? This is happening. What do I do about it? Other than drive around in a stolen car and go somewhere and then have to come back because, oh, I've got to go back because the people were there and I didn't take them with
It's
me.
a
And I
lot
gotta
of
help
back
them.
and forth. And the thing that really annoyed me a lot about the film was you would get 5 minutes of story or 5 minutes of progress, and then you would get like a cookie cutter scene that was from like any movie you've ever seen before. Like, okay, we're gonna do a scene with her and the eye doctor and have the exact conversation that you would have in any film where the protagonist is experiencing some head trauma and the back and forth of disbelief in the doctor, and you should take some time to rest.
Yeah.
And then we're going to go to a scene where she has to save, or she's trying to save her captain who just is dying, and the struggle of like, no, the captain, and then her like coworker has to come and pull her off and be like, let it go. And then we see her slowly watch him die and just fall to her knees, you know, like it's such very overly done scenes, and they're in this entire film.
Right.
The conversation between her and the girls are very repeated scenes with no fresh dialogue. I don't think there was one single line or bit of dialogue in this film to me that was fresh or made me laugh.
Yeah.
I was laughing at the ridiculousness of
Right.
things.
It's almost like it's almost like knowing what things a movie should have in it and then attempting to make a movie that has all the things in it that you think a movie needs to have,
Mm-hmm.
but somehow failing to hit the mark of any of those things.
Essentially following a recipe for a meal, but without actually reading the instructions, understanding how things cook,
Yeah.
and just being like, well, this has potatoes, carrots, beef, and onions.
Well, I have none of that, but I do have these leftover weird things in the fridge, and I'll follow the same instructions with none of the right
Or
ingredients.
saying like potatoes, carrots, beef, and onions, but not understanding that it has to be red potatoes, not russet potatoes. It has to be regular carrots, not, these,
Right.
and or like a yellow onion, not a white onion. You just like you know the ingredients, but you don't actually know the real ingredients to make this work, and then how to mix it and actually make it cohesive.
Yeah, that metaphor is actually better that way than what I attempted to do. Is you have the ingredients, but you don't know how to combine them properly. You don't have a recipe, and you also don't have sense of how the flavors can come together, how to use an oven, like anything.
And you're using this generic russet potato because you just know that's a potato, but you don't understand at any market there's 4 kinds of potatoes, and you grab the wrong one.
Right. Or Sony gives you the budget to only afford the non-organic, like run of the mill, cheapest ingredient possible.
So the script, was very bland and just very like hashed out. There was no thought put into it.
Yeah. And this movie was 2 hours. And if you actually tried to say, okay, let's trim out all of the waste, the movie would be 20 minutes, maybe
30.
I mean, they spent a ton of time. There's one part, she gets these girls off of the subway, gets them into a stolen cab,
steals a cab,
drives them out into the woods. And it's like, okay, it's to keep them safe or whatever. I mean, the guy uses the surveillance from all the cameras in the city to find them. Not that she knows that.
She shouldn't know that.
She just goes, all right, well, I'll take them to the woods, and who finds you in the woods, right? And then she leaves them there, says she'll be back in 3 hours. Meanwhile, these teenage girls are like, okay, you're just going to leave us in the woods? All right, whatever. And then we spend a million years just watching the girls debate whether or not they should leave. And
there's a diner.
Crap. And I love the fact that they have a campfire, and then they leave without putting it out.
Yes.
That's great.
They leave without putting it out, which, please, folks, put out your campfires when you're done with them safely.
Yeah, because they have the knowledge to. They live in and have grown up in New York City. But somehow know how to make a decent campfire.
Yeah, one of them
definitely
New
Yorkers, does. They go camping.
Surely
they have those survival skills.
Yeah.
But then not the sense to put it out.
No, and in the whole scene where they're going on and arguing about this diner, and one of the girls doesn't want to leave because Cassie told them to stay.
The goody two shoes.
You get like this little bit of dialogue between them about like their backstory and like their parents, and like, this like sprinkling of generic, we're kids who parents are too busy,
my dad's on vacation, my mom's not alive anymore,
my dad's been deported, and it's just like this sprinkle of information that is supposed to be there to get you to care or have depth about them, but it's said in this potpourri of a scene of so much nothing going on that there's no value to these girls' actual backstories.
Right. And that would have been the moment where, if you're those girls, you could be like, dude, who are you? Why are you doing this? And what do you have to do with this guy that's chasing us? Like, what is all this? Like,
which they
explain yourself. And then that would be the moment where she would be like, well, I'm having these visions. But instead she's like, trust me, I'll be back in 3 hours. Just stay in the woods for no reason.
Because they do have a conversation of like, wait, I know you. You're the EMT that like saved my dad.
Right.
And then the other girl's like, you live in my building. Right. And then the other girl's like, I don't know you. And she's like, no, wait, like, you flipped me off. So, and then it's just like quickly run over that. And you're right. She doesn't tell them anything about the visions.
Right.
She's just like, hey, I'm a complete stranger who just saved your life.
Right.
Just sit here and trust me
for
3 hours. What an arbitrary number.
Yeah.
I'll be back in a little bit. Would have been more believable.
Right.
I'll be back in 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's New York. You don't know the traffic right now, do you?
And the other thing is, typically these films have some sort of a supporting role that is a confidant of the main character that sort of stands out above all the other characters
Mm-hmm.
because they are the person that we establish the main character has the most trust in,
Right.
right? Which in this case, literally the first few minutes, her partner, Ben,
Mm-hmm.
who is, her partner in her ambulance or whatever. They have a great relationship. She's there for the baby shower. They have inside jokes with one another.
Yeah, I thought
and
the
there's a
opening
trusting
establishing their relationship was actually pretty
Yes.
good.
So, one of the sort of tropes of these kinds of fish out of water films is that the main character at some point, not too far into the film,
Goes to their best
goes
friend.
to them, and they're the first person that they try to say, you might think this is crazy. This might sound crazy, but, right? Because they're the one person that they think maybe won't think that they're just crazy.
Or they can help
Anyone
you get
else would
through
be like,
this
"You're
and
fucking
figure this
nuts."
out. Yes.
But they might be like, okay, it does sound crazy, but let's try to believe it. Okay, well, how can I help, right? She doesn't even get to getting in touch with him to
Until
get
an
his help
hour and
until like
40?
an hour and a half into the movie.
And then the way it happens is she decides to like take care of the girls, and she, I guess, realizes I've got to go to Peru right now, and she calls him up. We don't see her call him up. He just arrives, and she, in a quick hurry, trying to get into
Yeah.
the stolen cab.
She's
She
like,
still
just
has,
take these kids.
still has the stolen cab.
Right,
Yeah, I need you to watch these kids. I'll explain everything when I get back.
right. And they
He
mull
just-
it over very quickly by him having just one line about, I don't know what's going on, but good luck.
I trust you,
Yeah, so,
Adam Scott.
right. And it's
Why'd
funny you
you say
pointed out,
yes?
it's funny you pointed out his character's name in Parks and Rec is also Ben.
Yeah,
But it makes sense that his name is Ben in this film because he's apparently Uncle Ben.
right. When we started the movie and they were in the ambulance, she calls him Ben, and I thought,
You're like, oh
that's
God,
so
of all the
funny.
names they could have picked for that guy.
Why'd they call him Ben? And then like 10 minutes into the film, you hear his last name, and it's like, oh,
You're like, oh, okay.
okay, I forgive it, I guess.
Yeah. So
Ah.
there's
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so like the cinematography was unnecessary a lot of the time. There were so many, like, there was one scene where she's running up the fire escape, and like the camera like inverts and flips under her for like this weird action shot that was unnecessary.
Yeah. A lot of like tilted shots and things like that.
Felt
And I get it. It's
Want to
like,
be edgy and actiony, but they were doing it during scenes that weren't action.
yeah, a lot of like zooming that like is something I would shoot on my phone. If I had to shoot an action film using my phone,
Yeah.
I would zoom in and out a lot to
I
make
am
it seem
pretty
intense.
sure there was a moment where they zoomed in on her face on some dramatic line, and like a zoom in on the phone.
Right. And it's almost like she took a take to the lens as well, like a
like it was
like
the
in
office.
the office. Yeah.
That was something.
The thing that in the cinematography that I felt like I was noticing a lot was the color grading. That it seemed like
It felt everywhere.
it was everywhere. It was like they didn't commit to an aesthetic.
It
because
felt desaturated.
The
at
color
some
grading
point.
was like this, and then it was
felt
that,
darker.
and
It
then
felt
this.
red, too hot. Like
Yeah.
it was everywhere. Yeah, it wasn't even cohesive. The movie didn't have like a color tone. It didn't have like a visual color tone to the film. It was just kind of everywhere.
Right. They didn't commit to an aesthetic,
A look, a style, nothing.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's why I look at a film like this, and that's why I say like they just half-hash this. They just slap this together for the sake of a quick buck, keeping the license, whatever reason. You can just see it. This was just sloppily thrown together, and it was just for haste. It's just cranking out these movies as fast as possible. It doesn't matter that they're garbage. Sony knows that they're not good, because Sony puts out good quality stuff every now and then. They're not that blind to this. They know what they're doing. Just a quick cash grab.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell at the end of the day, even though the aesthetic was haphazard, the writing was awful, the actors obviously phoned it in. There was production value. I mean, they used cameras that probably cost more than $50.
Oh yeah.
And there was light. They used lighting.
Mm-hmm.
There was lighting.
Yeah.
So they paid somebody to do some very
were-
bad CGI where
There were stunt coordinators. There was actual live stunts, and there were explosions when
there
they
were
in, like,
at least
New York.
4 costumes. So there's that.
Yep.
Yeah.
There were.
They got a lot of mileage out of that red leather jacket, let me tell you.
Bruh. All in all, this was a very shoddy film. It was poorly written, poorly directed, poorly edited. I would seriously love to see an original director's cut, even though I don't want to ever watch this again. Just to see what was cut from this. Not that it would make it any better, like the Justice League Snyder cut, that would give so much more context and make it an actual film, but like there was still so much of fat that wasn't trimmed.
Yeah.
This movie could have been an hour at most.
Yeah. And another convention that we find with these sort of like superhero films or a lot of science fiction as well is, you know, at some point the writing, there are scenes to try to justify how this is possible.
Right.
So that we even so that we as an audience are given a reason to suspend our disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
If they say, you know, Ant-Man, I think is a great example. At some point, we're going to stop standing around in a laboratory and some scientist is going to tell us, well, normally this wouldn't be possible, but because of this and that, this is now possible.
Yeah.
And then we go, okay, fine. Now I can just relax and try to enjoy the movie and stop thinking about how they're breaking the laws of physics or that none of this makes any fucking sense.
Right.
Because you've told me why I should accept that in this situation, I should just stop thinking about that.
I often bring that up, that in a lot of movies and shows and media, if you just give one line of dialogue, you can just fix
Right.
half a film, half a season. You can just fix stuff.
Right.
Where it's exactly that. It's just like, well, yeah, we couldn't do that before, or that's impossible. Well, not thanks to Pym particles, we can do it. What the hell's a Pym particle? Don't worry about it. It allows him to do the thing that he does. Oh,
Right.
okay.
All
We're
right.
moving on.
Cool. Yeah, exactly. And it's not to say that in this film there weren't lines of dialogue that attempted to explain why these things were possible. It's just that they ripped past them so quickly. And it wasn't even in conversation between characters. It's like mumbled to myself, this thing that I read in my mom's journal. And I said 3 words that maybe the audience would have to spend their own time thinking about and connect dots. And it's not that I don't think that films should allow the audience to fill in some of their own blanks, because I think some of the most engaging films do that, where they just say, no, we're moving and you need to accept this as we go. But
I think that
would have helped us enjoy this movie to just tell us.
To add to what you're saying, what this movie is guilty of doing is not doing the creative, fun way of making the audience think and figuring it out as they lay breadcrumbs and we solve it on our own, which is super rewarding and always makes a movie very enjoyable. TV shows as well. What this movie is guilty of doing is that they introduce the mechanic, the MacGuffin, the spider in the very beginning of the film. And they tell you, the men in the arañas in the cave tell you, oh, this spider can grant powers and abilities. But then we don't see those abilities for like 30, 40 minutes.
Right.
And the time is way too far that it doesn't have the same impact anymore. One could argue, well, everyone knows if you get bit by a spider. We've seen enough Spider-Man movies. Those were radioactive spiders, folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
It took too long.
It's like the movie was like using conventions that at this point would signal to us that they are going to give us the answer. They are going to give us the answer, that they're not using conventions that other films use to inform the audience that they have to fill in the blanks. This movie said, we're going to help you get there. We're going to show you some things you don't understand, but we're going to tell you. But then they never do. not in a way that's sufficient for us to do what these movies tend to do, which is just give us what we need so that we can relax and just watch it and have fun. So instead, we're continually on the edge of understanding, but don't ever get to that. So we spend the movie trying to judge, analyze, and interpret, and by the time we're given the answer, quote unquote answer, it's the last scene of the film, and it's not even a revelation that justifies the delay.
And the whole the writing of all the characters in the film are so bland and boring and one-dimensional. Everyone in here, the movie it's set in 2003. It feels like it was written in 2003 and shot in 2003. It has all the cheesy tropes and like one-dimensional characters of a cheap 2003 attempt at a blockbuster action rando flick. Because like I talked about the girls and their backstory earlier, Cassie, I never once cared about her character in this film.
Right.
And as a protagonist in a film, you need to give the audience a reason to be watching the protagonist. They don't have to be lovable and likable.
Right.
But they have to be engaging. They have to make you want to watch more. And if they are going to be unlikable, there's a time period of allowance for that, and it will depend on your format of television, movie, or length before you have to make them redeemable in the viewer's eyes. Cassie, Madame Web, to me in this film, and this is not a comment on the actress, it's a comment on the writing, was never likable.
Yeah.
And that's why at the end, when she says, I have everything I need right here, is why I felt I had brain cells die in my head. It was so bleh.
Yeah. I think that you have to layer motivation, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's not just, this is a person, they're boring, now they have a power and they're not boring.
Right.
It's that there has to be a relationship between who they were before they got the power and the power that they receive. That the power gives them something that they didn't have prior. It gives them, one of the easiest ones is to say it gives them a level of control in their life that they didn't have, right?
Right.
The person is bullied and then they have power and now they're strong, right? So now they can get some sort of catharsis of I'm weak and bullied and now no one can ever bully me again. Right. So there's a layer
Peter
to
Parker.
that. Yes. So you give them a layer, and then them receiving the power and using it and being tempted. Right. Because what's the first thing that happens when this person receives power when they've been bullied and weak? Retribution, revenge. Right. And then what do all the side characters try to convince them not to do? Be vengeful. Okay, so now I use this the power and I try not to be vengeful against a villain who, guess what, is vengeful. Right? They have a revenge story. They're using the power in the wrong way. And I'm going to show the way by using it in the right way.
When you have immense power, it involves
stuff.
A big load of responsibility.
Yeah. So that's the thing. The motivations here are not layered, which is why the main characters we're not sympathetic to.
Yeah.
There's no analogy that we come to expect.
I also want to point out something even simpler too. What was really the goal and point of making her an EMT? What purpose did that really have in her character? I think it would have been even better her saving these girls if she wasn't an EMT, because to me that shows this character who doesn't care about kids, who just doesn't care about people, who's very awkward and weird around people. Saving these girls shows a progress. It shows a character arc of, I normally don't care about people.
Yeah.
But wait, I don't feel right about letting these girls die.
Yeah.
And that starts a domino effect of becoming a better person.
Right.
Of becoming a hero.
Yeah, that's another layer. What was that movie with Will Smith where he was like an anti-hero?
Hancock.
Yeah, Hancock. That's exactly what that was.
Mhm.
This guy was the last person that you would want with any power or responsibility. And he, throughout the film, finds a way to be compassionate, responsible, and give a shit. Again, we're layering the motivations of the character.
Mhm.
We start in one place and we get to a better place,
Mhm.
another place. And so we fall in love with their progress.
Mhm.
You know, and here's the thing, right? We're talking a lot about conventions, right? Well, typically these movies do this, and we're kind of arguing against this film that the conventions lead us to a better place, and their lack of following those conventions made this movie flat. But there's another side to great films, which is the films that break the conventions,
Yeah.
and they do so in a way that surprises us
Mhm.
in a good way.
They become
know,
pioneers. They become milestones for cinematography and storytelling, and revolutionize.
Yeah. So RuPaul, my wife and I are obsessed with RuPaul's Drag Race, and we watch all that stuff. And one of the pieces of advice sometimes that Ru gives to competitors, I've heard it maybe twice in a few seasons we've watched, is you know, a lot of them they have choreographers and they learn dance numbers.
Mhm.
Some of them struggle because they don't
That's not a strong
dancing's
suit.
not their thing,
Yeah.
right? So Ru will say you learn the choreography and then you throw it away. Because if we see you in your head on stage trying to remember the moves, that's all we see, right? We don't see your personality, we don't see excitement, the energy's low because you're in your head, right? And so you know, these films that sort of avoid the conventions, I think the reason why they're successful is because the writers, directors, whoever, the responsible creatives, they first know the conventions.
You have to know the rules
in
in
order
to
to break them appropriately. Yes.
I'm going to bring back my cooking analogy. If that recipe calls for carrots, potatoes, onions, and I don't know what else I said, and you don't have the correct potato or the right carrot or the right onion, but you know the rules of cooking,
right.
you know how to substitute,
Right.
you know how to take out the potato and put in another starch that is comparable, that will mix right with the ingredients that you're doing, then you can revolutionize and
Right.
make a meal. This is absolutely true. You need to know the rules in order to break them.
And you also need to not confuse sugar with salt, which is something that this film makes me feel. If this film was a dish and it called for sugar, they put salt. Because, man, oh, man.
There's a lot of salt. I don't think the film was producing the salt. I think it was us.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I definitely don't expect a sequel.
Oh, heavens no. But I will cackle.
Certainly not with the same cast.
I will cackle and I will call you the day I hear there's a sequel coming out. I will laugh.
I mean, maybe that's the next meta, right? Is let's make a film that is like one of the worst rated films ever, and then make a sequel in defiance of that response.
Ooh.
And somehow the sequel box office is better
Sony,
than
I
the
dare
original.
You. I dare
purely because people have decided they like torture.
Yeah.
It's Stockholm Syndrome.
I used to say that one of the biggest Hollywood movies, one of the worst Hollywood blockbuster films I've ever seen was Transformers 2. I don't know if you can consider this a blockbuster film, but it is now this. This was bad.
It was rough. I mean, look, somehow it could have been worse. I can't come up with an example right this moment of how it could have been worse.
Yeah,
but it could have been worse.
It can always be worse.
I didn't stop and just quit. And there are films that I have quit.
Yeah.
I didn't quit this one. Maybe because we knew we wanted to do an episode of podcast about
absolutely.
it. If it weren't for this, if it weren't for the fact that you and I agreed we wanted to watch this movie and do a podcast episode about it, I would never have watched it. This is one of those moments where when I saw, okay, everybody had a negative response to it, and then I looked up the writers and saw that they were the writers of Morbius, and I'd seen Morbius, I was like, okay, this is an example where I can actually trust the general public's opinion,
because I've seen
and just leave
exactly. It's like looking for a wedding photographer, and you see that their work is not what you like, you don't like their
Yeah,
previous
you
stuff.
look at their portfolio.
Yeah, you
go,
look at
nah.
the portfolio like any other person. Let me see your work. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't want to work with you. I don't want to watch you again. I wanted to see this film. Had we not decided to do the podcast on this film, I would have probably checked out at some point during the film. I don't know when. But it would have been way before I have everything I need right here. Way
And-
before that.
Yeah, I won't fault you if you would have seen it anyways, because I know that you're more into that fandom, and I think you
Yeah.
would still want to be able to engage in conversations
Yes.
with other friends and family who also, are engaged in those fandoms
I
to
do
be
not,
able to speak about it from an informed place.
absolutely. I do not like being pedantic. I don't appreciate those that are pedantic. I don't like reading reviews and hearing other people's conversations about a subject and then regurgitating those facts. Like, I want my own opinion. I want to see the thing and have my own opinion. Please don't engage me in pedantic arguments or conversations, because I don't respond nasty. I just stop responding. I like to have my own opinion. And that's why I wanted to see this film even, or after I saw the reviews. I was like, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because one thing that I've always believed in is that a wise man can learn more from a fool than a fool can learn from a wise man. And I think as a creative, you can learn a great deal from great artists, but you can also learn quite a bit from not so great or inexperienced artists.
Right.
Because you can learn a lot from mistakes. You can learn a lot from poor execution.
Yeah.
And better appreciate good things.
I really do like that point. I feel like anyone who really loves film should watch bad movies from time to time. You should do it because it'll give you a fresh perspective on what about movies you appreciate is what you appreciate. I can better define what the characteristics of a great film, because I have to be able to compare it to something.
Highly agreed. It makes those special films even more special. And you can't have the sweet without the tart.
Yeah.
Jason Lee. Was that Mallrats, or it was a Kevin Smith film? But it's absolutely true. You got to have a little bit of tart. And I mean, I am one of the first people to admit, like, I love some cheesy movies that are regarded as terrible. I love them. Love them. I'll rewatch them. But, it reminds me how good great films are.
Yeah. It almost makes me think of David Lynch, Twin Peaks.
Mm-hmm.
I think, people look at Twin Peaks and they're like, oh, they're trying to be weird, right?
They're being weird for the sake of being weird.
Right. But I consider Twin Peaks to be to define a certain kind of genre. I think being weird in that way is a genre. And I think it's successful because it makes fun of the conventions that are employed by serials. That the things that stand out as weird, it's almost like an awareness of the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And that awareness has to come from other examples.
Mm.
Soap operas do these things. The scenes look like this. The cameras are positioned in these ways. The lighting is like this. The dialogue sounds like this. So then you can mock those things you have to study the bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I may be completely off base. For those of you who are David Lynch fans, you might be like, that's not why. Okay. But that's what I walk away with it from.
I will take your word for it. I've never seen Twin Peaks.
Oh, man.
I know what
We
you're
should
going to
at
say.
least see one episode, because I think you'd really be
I'd be down
intrigued
for
by
it.
it.
The original or like the more
the
recent
original.
one?
The recent one makes no fucking sense.
Oh, okay.
No, the original. We'll watch the first episode of the original. In fact, I think
That'd
it's
be fun. Okay.
I think yesterday was like an anniversary
Oh, okay.
of the first episode,
Okay.
because
I see what you mean about, and I, having not seen Twin Peaks, I know what you're saying because while it wasn't Twin Peaks, I know what you mean in the sense of they're doing something purposely in that direction for that effect. And one could argue in some ways it is, you know, you're making films for filmmakers or you're making shows for showmakers instead of general audiences. I don't necessarily think that's always a bad thing. I think that it's fine. And I think sometimes when you do something like that, you bring in an audience member that suddenly finds a reason to create. You inspire. And I can't speak further, but I know what you mean and I agree with it.
You have to know the good conventions that make a good film good, and you need to know the conventions that make bad films bad. You need to know what makes a good one good and a bad one bad. And I think this movie feels like they didn't reference either.
Yes.
They didn't know what was going to make this movie bad. And they also didn't know how to make it good.
Yeah, they just took an IP, some characters, gave a generic plot point of, okay, well, this is how I imagine this film was pitched and done. Hey, execs, we need another random Sony character from Spider-Man to create a film on. I don't know, let's do something like Guardians of the Galaxy and go in mega deep into the comics. Who's this Madame Web character? Let's use her. Let's, she doesn't really do a lot. Well, let's just create a story where she, like, what's her powers? All right, let's pick 3 other random spider characters. Oh, okay. Let's have a reason. Oh, a supervillain that's trying to kill them. That's always a plot. Okay, now let's write a movie about that. But you know what? Don't take more than 2 weeks.
Yeah. And, you know, I just recently rewatched Mad Max Fury Road. All they had was storyboards. There was no script.
Yeah.
Which was a shocking thing that I learned later.
Yeah.
And
it's one of my favorite facts about that film.
And that's it right there. I mean, it just proves the point that you, in a way, with the right team, you don't even need a fucking script.
Yeah.
And you can still make an amazing film.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's like, God, could this have even been a good film if they had just said, you know what, this script fucking sucks. Let's just go out on set and figure it out as we go. It might have been better.
I think it could have definitely been better. But I will say this. If you were to take this plot at its core and challenge me, who has never written a movie before, I could produce you a better script. Can I produce you a better movie? Probably not. I don't know the first thing about making films.
Okay, how about this?
But I could write you a better script.
Okay, let's make a commitment to our audience right now.
Okay.
For those of you listening, watching, etc.,
that are still here.
Right now, our YouTube channel, Have You Seen, which is movie reactions. One of us or both of us hasn't seen the film, so we watch the film, and you watch us watch it, and we react. Right now, we're like 500 something subscribers. If we get to 1,000, and you can help us by subscribing right now. If we get to 1,000, Carlos will write a synopsis of his version of Madame Web.
What is the synopsis?
You give me a 1-page plot that we'll post in our Discord when we hit 1,000 subscribers.
Man, I was really hoping you were going to be like, write an entire scene.
Write an entire scene then.
Well,
pick the worst scene in this film and fix it.
No, I'm not fixing the hospital bed scene. I am not fixing that. You got to fix a whole lot of other scenes first. All right. Yeah, I will write a better synopsis. And I feel like I have to have parameters. Like I have to use the exact characters in this film. I cannot add new characters.
Yes. You have to stick within yes.
Like it has to be like within this. I just need to make the writing better.
Yeah. Just give us a better structure. Give us a better beginning, middle, end. Take us through some plot points that would have helped. Give us, pace it out and maybe even draw us a storyboard cell. Give us one.
You're gonna get some dope stick figures made in MS Paint.
Do it. I'd love it.
In the words of the famous Barney Stinson, challenge accepted. I'll do it. If we hit 1,000 subscribers, I will rewrite the synopsis to Madame Web and I will knock it out the park.
Bonus, we'll film it. We'll film a scene from your synopsis on our phone.
That's when we get like 5,000
We'll
subscribers. I don't have the budget for
We'll
that.
do a 2-minute edited shot.
It'll be me as Madame Web and
Hell
then
yeah.
you playing the 3 teenagers in
All
like
3 of
different
them.
wigs.
Yes. I love it. Okay. Well, that's the thing. So
That was
join
the
our
thing.
Discord and subscribe, and you'll get to
Yes.
enjoy that.
Yes, join our Discord,
It's a promise.
subscribe, check us out on YouTube at Have You Seen. Our Discord is also by the same name, Have You Seen?
Yep.
And
Link in the description.
link in the description. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out.